I think it's better for our workers. And I much would prefer a bilateral deal, a deal directly with Japan. We already have a deal with 6 of the 11 nations in the TPP. So we already have trade deals, and the others we can make very easily. They're all calling wanting to make a deal. But we think that's much better for us. So unless they offer us a deal that we cannot refuse, I would not go back into TPP. We'll see what happens. But in the meantime, we're negotiating, and what I really prefer is negotiating a one-on-one deal with Japan, and that's where we are right now. And I will say that the representatives who are sitting right here are extraordinarily competent and very tough, those representing Japan. And we will hopefully, in the not-too-distant future, have a very good deal, good for Japan and good for the United States. Okay? Thank you all very much. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
President Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe answering questions there, 2 aside, and making statements at the beginning. Nearly 40 minutes down there in Mar-a-Lago in the ballroom. Things that stuck out to us. New York, let's listen in.
Here's a question. There has been nobody tougher on Russia than President Donald Trump. Between building up the military, between creating tremendous, vast amounts of oil, we raised billions and billions of dollars extra in NATO. We had a very, very severe, we were talking about it a little while, fight in Syria recently, a month ago, between our troops and Russian troops, and that's very sad. But many people died in that fight. There has been nobody tougher than me. With the media, no matter what I did, it's never tough enough because that's their narrative. But Russia will tell you there has been nobody tougher than Donald Trump. And then the other night, we had a strike in Syria, which was absolute precision. I leave it with this. With all of that said, if we can get along with China, and if we can get along with Russia, and if we can get along with Japan and other nations, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. Just remember that. If we got along with other nations, that's good, not bad. Thank you very much, everybody.
Bonus round of questions there as the president answers one about Russia. No one tougher than this president, according to him, on Russia. Things that stuck out in this news conference down there. A question about North Korea and the trip by the CIA Director, Secretary of State nominee, Mike Pompeo, saying that it was a good trip and that the conditions are set for his meeting, the president's meeting with Kim Jong-un, also saying that they are working on getting the 3 Americans that North Korea is holding to be released, and there is progress. Also, that there will be bilateral trade talks and negotiations in free, fair, and reciprocal trade deal with Japan. And then finally asked about the Mueller probe and whether he was going to fire Mueller or Rosenstein, the president saying they've been saying, these 2 gentlemen, for 3, 4, 5 months that I was going to get rid of them. They're still here. I want this over, essentially. I've got negotiating to do. Let's bring back our panel, Jonathan Swan, A.B. Stoddard, and Molly Hemingway. Jonathan, what stood out to you?
A couple of things. It's clear that Japan is going to try and reduce the trade deficit by buying lots and lots of American weapons. That seems to be their strategy to reduce the trade deficit, which is the major metric that Trump is concerned about on that area. It's also clear that Japan is quite concerned about the U.S. giving too much for too little. You saw Abe, after the president spoke, say we need to keep up the maximum pressure campaign on North Korea. We can't give up an inch. They need to actually do concrete things to denuclearize. So you do see some of that coming through. And it's clearly a very close relationship. The two have a close personal rapport. And, you know, trade is one of the big issues that Trump's trying to
let's put up this tweet earlier. This is just a picture from them golfing earlier today. And that was referenced in the news conference as well. They do have a close relationship. Shinzo Abe was the first leader to reach out to President Trump after he won the election. Molly, your thoughts on what you heard?
Yeah, and it was interesting that he talked about the emotional issues in play and how much it meant to him that Donald Trump talked about the abducted people and the need to get them back, how much they agree on issues like the abducted Japanese, also that they are of the shared mindset about maximum pressure against North Korea. North Korea has previously said that they are going to denuclearize. Previous administrations have gotten them to say that, but it doesn't actually happen. So that's why it's very important, and I think Abe was very good about talking about this, the need to verify any denuclearization plans and that they are unified in that approach.
I want to play this soundbite. I talked to Shinzo Abe in Japan. Something very similar that he mentioned in this news conference, he mentioned to me. Take a listen.
But North Korea has used those talks just to gain time to further develop the nuclear program, as well as missiles. So North Korean dialogue just for the purpose of dialogue is meaningless. That is our experience.
Yeah, and he emphasized that, AB. I think that's still their concern, but that they're somewhat hopeful, according to this news conference today.
Right. Prime Minister Abe is very, you mentioned he was the first to dart across the seas to meet with President-elect Donald Trump during the transition because he was so afraid of the kinds of things that President Trump said as a candidate about the expense of these alliances that we have and questioning their usefulness. And he, because he's Japanese and because he's a good politician, wasn't going to say anything except for the exact Trump talking points about fair reciprocal trade and everything else, and everything's hunky-dory in this press conference. But it's true what Molly mentioned. He wanted to get out there that in public that he's anxious that the U.S. could get to the table and then get ripped off. And that's why in private it's clear President Trump made clear several times he's such a tough negotiator, because in private he's telling you exactly what he told you, that you could get suckered. And that's why President Trump seemed to say for the first time, I'm going to walk away if it's not going well. But it was remarkable to see him thank the Chinese, and also just after that campaign and this first year, for him to strike such a solicitous tone about the importance of alliances and to be so emphatic about his loyalty to Japan, it was really a change.
It was interesting to watch. The atmospherics also, the translators switching for Japan a couple of times. We had a male and a female. Don't know why they went to the bullpen, but we'll figure that out. And also a lovely tribute to Barbara Bush at the beginning with a couple of chuckles where he praised their 73 years of marriage to H.W. Bush, saying, "I'll never beat that record." That's it for us. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. Here's Martha. Martha.
Thank you very much, Brett. So, as Brett and company have just been discussing, the president just wrapped up a press conference with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. We expect that in this hour, we will hear more off-the-cuff comments from the president and the Prime Minister of Japan again at Mar-a-Lago. So as soon as that gets underway, we will take you there live. And there is also tonight, not too far from here, another James Comey book event. As that battle and the media blitz continue to heat up tonight, it seems that his book tour is prompting an attempt by some House Republicans to throw the book at him and everyone else at the FBI and DOJ who was involved in the Clinton investigation. Nearly a dozen House Republicans are now demanding that the DOJ investigate several Obama-era officials. Here is the response on that when he was asked about it. Here's the former FBI director today.
How do you respond in real time? I'm sorry to
I know I'm doing a lot of shrugging today, but I haven't read it. I don't know what to make of it. It seems they've been saying that stuff since the Clinton email investigation. A whole lot of that's already being looked at by the Inspector General at the Department of Justice, which is a very good thing. And I don't have any other reaction.
Okay.
The accusations are not true. I guess I should have said that first.
Yeah. So in moments, we will hear from constitutional law professor Jonathan Turley, who today wrote a stinging column saying that Comey is channeling the Kardashians and the president himself these days. And Jonathan Turley will tell us why he said that in just a moment. But first, Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge with the breaking news tonight on this continuing investigation live in Washington. Catherine.
Well, thanks, Martha. The letter from House Republicans calls on the Justice Department, FBI, and a U.S. attorney to investigate key players in the Clinton email and Russia investigations, as well as Uranium One, a business deal tied to the Clintons. The wide-ranging letter levels allegations against former FBI Director James Comey, former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, Hillary Clinton, and former Attorney General Loretta Lynch, among others. Lawmakers question whether their actions potentially violated federal statutes on lying, perjury, obstruction of justice, as well as federal election law. Tonight, the Justice Department declined to comment on the letter. There was no immediate response from the FBI. In a statement to Fox News, McCabe's lawyer said his client got a raw deal from his old boss and the Justice Department's internal watchdog, who concluded McCabe lied 4 times about a media leak. Quote, the report fails to adequately address the evidence, including sworn testimony and documents, that prove Mr. McCabe advised Director Comey repeatedly that he was working with the Wall Street Journal. Neither Mr. Comey nor the Inspector General is infallible. In this case, neither of them has it right. Last night on your show, the Republican chairman of the House Government Oversight Committee said he also wants the feds to review emails and text messages that raise new questions about Comey's statement to Congress about the email case and the level of coordination with the Justice Department.
I'm going to send it to the Inspector General, and I'm going to send it to the Department and the FBI. To the extent that there is an allegation that false testimony was given, Congress is not the entity to investigate that.
And today, Congressman Gowdy's office followed through with a formal request to the FBI and the DOJ, Martha.
Catherine, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Constitutional law professor Jonathan Turley wrote this today, quote, Comey is selling himself with the vigor of a Kardashian and the viciousness of a Trump. While professing to write the book to protect the FBI as an institution, Comey is doing that institution untold harm by joining an ignoble list of tell-all authors. Professor Turley joins me now. Professor, very strong words in your column today for James Comey. What's that coming from?
Well, I think that many career people at the Justice Department must really find this quite repulsive. The very notion of a former FBI director writing a tell-all book is a virtual contradiction in terms. You know, FBI directors have valued their circumspection. You know, they need to have presidents trust them. And Comey has really destroyed that. And it's not just the book. It's not just the tenor, but the timing. You know, the fact that he rushed this book out is inexcusable. He was the head of this investigation and is now one of the cooperating witnesses. Nobody would suggest that this book is benefiting the investigation. To the contrary, he's undermining his role as a witness. And so the question is, why is he doing it? And the answer is rather obvious. He's going to make a lot of money, but in the process, he's going to do untold harm to the institution he once headed.
He was asked about, his intentions today and why he wrote the book. And he said, well, I didn't clear it with the special counsel, Robert Mueller, but I did, put the book through the paces at the FBI. He was on The View today. Meghan McCain said that she felt that he was sounding more like a political commentator with the discussions that he's had around the book. And he said, it's not about politics, my book. He said, it's about values.
Yeah, well, that's a particularly odd aspect of this spin. First of all, why wouldn't you clear it with Mueller? I thought you were all about the FBI, all about the rule of law. Why wouldn't you clear with Mueller? I mean, you are one of his cooperating witnesses. But more importantly, when you read that book, it's a bit of a sham. He says, well, I wrote this book because America's looking for ethical leadership. Really? So the ethical leadership is him. He's saying, America needs me. I'm selling me. But the problem with that pitch is that when Comey was fired, he removed 7 memos from the FBI, in my view, inappropriately. That was FBI material linked to an investigation. 4 of those memos now are believed to be classified. Now, it's just like the book. He could have given it to Congress. He could have given it to the investigators. But instead, the man charged with finding leakers became a leaker himself and gave it to a friend so the information could get to the media. That's not ethical leadership.
One of the things that's in this letter that some of these Republicans have put together, and James Comey said, that's not even necessary, that letter, because the Inspector General is already looking into this. But one of the things that the Inspector General is looking into is Rod Rosenstein's reasoning for recommending the firing of James Comey. And he's saying that James Comey reached a conclusion on his investigation of Hillary Clinton before he had even interviewed her. And when James Comey was asked about that, Jonathan, he basically said, well, if you don't know where an investigation's going, and you've been at it a year, and you don't know what direction it's going, you're doing something wrong. What do you think about all that?
Well, I thought it was particularly strange. You know, he indicated that, no, this happens all the time. We write letters about the conclusion of the investigation before a conclusion has been reached. This is part of that spin that's coming out of the book. And it really is undermining his credibility. He's going to make a lot of money, but he will damage his reputation, his legacy, and there are very important and good things about his legacy, and he will damage the FBI. And in the end, you know, Trump does have this ability to get his critics to sort of bring out the worst in his critics. And Comey is fulfilling the stereotype that Trump laid out for him.
Jonathan Turley, always a pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Good to
Martha.
see you tonight. So coming up, Eric Holder in 2020, it is really starting to look like the former Attorney General is making his move. And Mike Pompeo's uphill battle for confirmation. General Jack Keane has something he wants to say about that. He spoke with the CIA director before his trip to North Korea, and he's got a message for the committee and about the nominee for the State Department leadership. Bill Bennett also is here with his wise words on confirmation and other stories coming up next.
My main complaint has always been that I don't think he shares the same vision as the president on foreign policy.
I think Mike Pompeo is extraordinary. He was #1 at West Point. He was top at Harvard. He's a great gentleman. I think he'll go down as truly a great Secretary of State.
So that was the president today when asked about his CIA director's tough path through the committee for confirmation to be Secretary of State. The president said Pompeo's talks with Kim Jong-un in North Korea went very well, opening an unprecedented diplomatic door. So why is the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which is made up of many senators who voted for Pompeo when he was up for director of the CIA, why are they now changing their tune on this same individual? It is a story of D.C. politics at work. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry joins us now live with the story tonight. Hi, Ed.
Martha, great to see you. I've spoken to some of the president's top advisors who believe there's no good reason to block Mike Pompeo's nomination other than Democratic obstructionism. And there are signs tonight the White House is trying to play hardball with those Democrats by leaking out some of the details of the CIA director's mission to North Korea. And here's why. Sending Pompeo to Pyongyang, the highest level official to visit since Bill Clinton's Secretary of State 18 years ago, suggests these talks are much further along than the president's critics want to admit. And there's a school of thought that administration officials leaked word of the mission in order to pressure Democrats and say, how can you vote against the Secretary of State nominee when he's so directly involved in such sensitive diplomacy? Yet 9 of 10 Democrats on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee have announced they're voting no, while the 10th Democrat, Chris Coons of Delaware, says he's undecided. But complicating the White House's effort to blame this on Democrats is the fact that Rand Paul, one of 11 Republicans on the committee, has said he'll vote no because he thinks Pompeo is too hawkish, and he's upset about the director's support of the CIA's use of harsh interrogation techniques for terrorists. Paul revealed today he spoke by phone with the president, who urged him to meet with Pompeo, though Paul is suggesting that's not likely to change his mind over concerns about U.S. entanglements overseas. Now, historians cannot find an example of a Secretary of State being voted down by the Foreign Relations Committee, though his nomination could still be sent to the Senate floor for an up or down vote. With the GOP's slim majority, though, and Senator John McCain unlikely to vote because of health, the White House has to get Democratic votes. So today, Pompeo met with Democrat Claire McCaskill. She faces a tough re-election in a red state, and he sounded positive after meeting with moderate Democrat Mark Warner. Listen.
How did your meeting with Senator Warner go?
Great day. Enjoying my time here. I earn every vote I can.
I will say this about Rand Paul. He's never let me down. Rand Paul is a very special guy as far as I'm concerned. He's never let me down. And I don't think he'll let us down again. So let's see what happens.
Bottom line, if Paul does not come along, the president is going to have to count on other Democrats from red states like Joe Manchin, Heidi Heitkamp, Joe Donnelly, some of those folks to vote for Pompeo. So much on the line because, as you heard the president just say at that news conference down in Florida with the Japanese prime minister, these are very sensitive diplomatic talks right now. He wants his Secretary of State in place, Martha.
Certainly. All right. Thank you, Ed. Thank you.
Good to see you.
So joining me now, General Jack Keane, Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman for the Institute of the Study of War. General, good to see you tonight. I know that you spoke to the CIA director before this secret mission that he went on to North Korea. We've heard Rand Paul saying he doesn't think that Mike Pompeo is lined up with the president on foreign policy. Do you agree?
Well, first of all, yeah, I did speak to him. He certainly didn't disclose his visit to North Korea, but the subject we spoke at length on North Korea. And I believe a couple things. One, the Central Intelligence Agency's clearly got the best focus on Kim Jong-un, who he is, and a profile on him, and the director, Pompeo, understands that fully. Pompeo also has tremendous grasp of what the issues are in North Korea and certainly what the risks are. And I totally agree that Pompeo is on the same page with the president and his entire national security, foreign policy agenda. And I think his relationship with the president as a result of the daily briefings is excellent. They truly understand one another. They're both very bright, and they both learn from each other.
What was the purpose of this trip to North Korea, and what do you think the administration learned from it in terms of what it's going to look like once he goes there, if indeed he goes?
Yeah, I think the primary purpose is not certainly as a preliminary step to actually having a meeting with the two leaders. The primary purpose was to stress test Kim Jong-un's determination and sincerity and authenticity about really making a deal. And the fact that Pompeo has debriefed the president, and the president is going forward with this summit meeting, with all the political risks associated with it. After all, no president of the United States has ever met with a North Korean leader, and certainly never had a pivotal discussion like they're about to have. That tells me that Director Pompeo told the president, look, there is an opportunity here, and it's worth the risk of going into a meeting with this guy. Because he had to convince Pompeo about some sincerity here. And Pompeo knows he's dealing with a liar, a manipulator, a thug, and a killer. But at the same time, there's huge national security interests at risk for the world, for the region, and for the United States here. Yeah. So I think that's what happened, Martha, and that's why we are where we are.
It's a huge moment. General, this is what the president just said about this potential meeting. Watch.
If I think that it's a meeting that is not going to be fruitful, we're not going to go. If the meeting when I'm there is not fruitful, I will respectfully leave the meeting. We've gotten us here, and I think we're going to be successful. But if for any reason I feel we're not, we end.
What do you think, General?
I think that's absolutely the right call. And he's going forward because he believes there is an opportunity, and he certainly wants to seize it. That's the kind of leader he is. He's willing to take some risk, to seize that opportunity. We've seen that happen in the last 15 months. Listen, we're on a cusp here of a potential huge event. We haven't had a potential diplomatic achievement like this since the end of the Korean War. So it is really extraordinary what the potential is here.
Fascinating. General Jack Keane, always good to see you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, good talking to you, Martha.
So here now with more on all of this, Bill Bennett, former Secretary of Education to President Reagan and former drug czar under President George H.W. Bush. He is also a Fox News contributor. He's been through a few confirmations of his own. What do you make of the fact that Mike Pompeo could potentially have a very uphill battle here, Bill?
It tells you how ugly things are in Washington, how narrow and short-sighted are the Democrats. Jack Keane laid it out very well, except I'll issue one correction to my friend, and I esteem and admire Jack Keane. I think some of the diplomacy that Ronald Reagan practiced at Reykjavik was world historic as well in his meetings with Gorbachev. But that aside, this is huge. It's monumental, as General Keane was saying. You're talking about nuclear deterrence. You're talking about nuclear security. You're talking about a possible diplomatic solution. And here's the guy who went and had that conversation diplomatically, and the Democrats are talking about opposing him. I heard a couple of Democrat spokesmen on TV today saying, well, he's not really enthusiastic about gay marriage. Seriously? Is this what we're talking about? By the way, on gay marriage, Barack Obama and the Clintons weren't all out and for it until a few years ago. But this is not the grounds on which you decide who should be the Secretary of State. The other kind of opposition, that he's too bellicose, Rand Paul, again, a person I respect, is just mistaken, Martha. I mean, he went diplomatically. He didn't go to put something secret in Kim Jong-un's cup of tea. This was a diplomatic mission. The guy can be obviously a very effective diplomat. Let me just say as well, along with Tom Cotton and one or two other people, this is about the best resume in America right now. Number one from the U.S. Military Academy, top of his class in Harvard Law School. The hearing showed what a bright and thoughtful and decent guy he is. So Democrats do this, and if they do it, it could hurt that meeting. That meeting might not take place. It might not take place with the right kind of atmosphere. That will be a price that they will have to pay for a very long time. Think of the risk, the downside of losing this meeting.
Stakes are very high. Bill Bennett, thank you so much. Good to see you tonight, sir.
Oh, thanks, Martha. Thanks very much.
So today, now after so many have come forward, U.S. Olympic gold medalist Michaela Maroney is now finally also breaking her silence on Dr. Larry Nassar, saying that he molested her hundreds of times as well, while gymnastics leadership looked the other way.
Doing what's right is not always easy, but I need to speak up for the girls and for the future.
U.S. Olympic medalist Jamie Dancer testifying today on Capitol Hill, and she joins us next. And look who's headed to New Hampshire. Eric Holder says it's true. He is thinking about running for president. Katie Pavlik and Juan Williams up next.
I'm not sure I'll get the most honest answer from you for this question, so I asked you, is he running for president? Is Eric Holder running for president?
You are looking live at Mar-a-Lago right now, where it has been a busy night. The president and the first lady are expected to welcome Japanese Prime Minister Abe and his wife. We just saw the news conference, which was very interesting just a little while ago with the president and the prime minister. And now it is almost time for dinner in Palm Beach, Florida. And we're going to take you, a lot of times we're going to get some shouted questions, and we'll bring you there live as soon as that gets underway. And this alert for you moments ago, a Delta plane has an engine that caught fire. You can see the smoke coming off the right-hand side of the plane there. Apparently, this is taking place at Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. Trace Gallagher has been following all of this from our West Coast newsroom with the breaking news tonight. Trace, what's going on here?
This was a Delta flight, Martha, from Atlanta to London, and about 30 minutes after takeoff, there were reports, as you saw the picture there, of a small fire in the plane's right engine. Now, there is a photographer who works for our Atlanta Fox affiliate. He happened to be on board that plane, and he took some video of smoke coming out of the engine, and clearly you can see from this smoke the plane is on the ground. It did land safely, but you can see back there the flaps are up and the smoke is coming out the back. There are no reports of any injuries. The plane is now being towed back to the gate. Witnesses say the plane is an Airbus A330 and it was carrying some 274 passengers. We have calls into Delta and the FAA. So far, no response and no word on when those passengers might be rerouted. You see the video inside. The people are calm. The plane is down. There apparently was never any report of any problems with the landing or an emergency landing, but this did pull off the end of the runway and it will be towed back to the gate. You'll recall it was about 30 minutes into yesterday's Southwest Airlines flight from New York to Dallas when the left engine on the 737 broke apart, shooting debris and piercing a window in row 17. A woman sitting next to that window was killed after being hit by shrapnel and then being partially sucked out of the window. The coroner now says that woman, identified as Jennifer Reardon, died of blunt impact trauma of the head, neck, and torso. It remains unclear if her death is a result of the impact from the shrapnel, the force of being sucked toward the window, or a combination of both. Investigators say she was wearing her seatbelt at the time of the incident, and they still do not know exactly why the entire window blew out. A group of passengers pulled that woman back in. They know the engine was caused, this blowout was caused by a fan blade that was just blown apart. It was apparently some metal fatigue. It's the very same problem that happened to a Southwest 737, same engine, same problem 2 years ago, and there was an air directive put out on that plane. We should tell you that yesterday marked the first U.S. airline fatality in 9 years, and now we've had 2 engine blowouts in 2 days, but the planes are totally different in these cases. Martha.
That Southwest story is so awful. Trace, thank you very much.
Yep.
Okay, so also tonight, controversial U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder is apparently now thinking pretty seriously about running for president.
I'm not sure I'll get the most honest answer from you for this question, so I asked you, is he running for president? Is Eric Holder running for president?
I keep asking him because I want to know if I have to quit my job and move to Iowa, so I don't know.
If he will promise to be my press secretary, I might consider it.
You are considering it?
Yeah, I'm thinking about it, but I've not made any determinations.
Oh, there you go. He is making all the right moves, now heading to New Hampshire to a traditional event for people who are considering running. So he's exploring his options. He, of course, is one of the more polarizing figures from the Obama administration for his involvement in Fast and Furious and the scandal at the IRS. So does he have a shot? Katie Pavlich, townhall.com, news editor and a Fox News contributor. Juan Williams, co-host of The Five and a Fox News political analyst. Good to see both of you tonight. Thanks for being here. So what do you think, Juan? Should Eric Holder run, and what kind of chance would he have?
I don't know. If you're asking me, I really don't have an opinion on whether he should run, but I do think he would basically be an Obama doppelganger, kind of a tall, smart, trained as a lawyer, centrist Democrat. He's a little more heated than Obama in terms of his temperament. I'd put him in the second tier, Martha. I think, in our celebrity soap culture on the Democratic side as well as the Republican side right now, you people are talking about Michelle Obama or Oprah. But in realistic terms, I think Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders are at the head of the class, maybe the 2 women senators, Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren. And then I'd put right there Eric Holder in that mix. He's well respected by the power players in the Democratic Party.
He's the only Attorney General, U.S. Attorney General in history to be held in both criminal and civil contempt during his time in office, Katie. So it's pretty easy to figure out where the Republicans would take their arguments against Eric Holder.
Well, and it wasn't just Republicans who voted him in contempt. It was also Democrats who voted him in contempt for refusing to turn documents over as part of Operation Fast and Furious, where a Border Patrol agent was killed as a result of his department running illegal firearms into Mexico, where hundreds of people were killed. Juan argues that Eric Holder is a centrist. I would argue that he's a far-left radical. And if you want a candidate who is corrupt and is scandal-ridden, Eric Holder's your guy. You already mentioned the IRS scandal. You had him spying on reporters multiple times. You had him apologizing for that eventually. You had him being involved in not prosecuting Black Panthers for intimidating voters at the polls. And he's been fighting tooth and nail against voter ID laws, which 70+% of the country agrees with. And so I would say he's very far left. People who worked with him in the Justice Department, like J. Christian Adams, have written about this. His entire focus while he was there was on race issues, not bringing people together, but dividing the country. So Eric Holder, I think, is a far-left candidate that will not be welcomed by the majority of the country.
So besides that one, Katie thinks he's awesome, and he has a great shot at it.
I can tell Katie has a lot of fire in her. The thing about it is that that contempt vote, I think, would be used by the Republicans in a general election if Holder was the Democratic candidate. But keep in mind, the 2020 election is really going to be a referendum on Donald Trump. And whoever the Democrat is, I don't care if it's Mother Teresa or Jesus himself, that person is going to be vilified by the Republicans so that Trump looks like the more appealing of the 2 options. But I will say this, Katie, you have people that I work with, Karl Rove, Josh Bolton. They have been held in contempt by congressional committees. And I think so much of that Fast and Furious stuff really was heavily politicized. But it will come back. You're right. It'll come back. They'll try to use it.
The Terry family doesn't feel that way, and they feel like their justice has not been given to this day. And luckily, all the documentation that they've been requesting for years is finally going to be turned over by this Justice Department after a long fight. And they believe that Eric Holder lied to them, that he was dishonest under oath. And believe me, Republicans will use this against him if he decides to run, because he deserves to be held accountable for it, since he wasn't held accountable by Barack Obama.
All right, thanks, guys. We got to leave it there. Good to see you both.
Thanks,
Martha.
So tonight, the fight to make ending the life of Downs babies illegal is moving to Pennsylvania. Dr. Gina Loudon, who has a deeply personal passion about this movement in America, joins us in a moment. And Dr. Nasser is now in prison. But what about all of the people who should have protected our Olympic athletes as children? Are they next in the hot seat? Today's shocking testimony from bronze medalist Jamie Dancher, next.
Your days of manipulation are over. We have a voice now. We have the power now.
Okay, back to Mar-a-Lago live as the president and the first lady welcome Japanese Prime Minister Abe and Mrs. Abe. Let's watch. All right, so they're just standing there at the moment. They're standing outside their door waiting for another couple to come for dinner. And it is the Prime Minister and his wife from Japan. So we have seen a very interesting kind of back and forth today from the president. You heard him speaking out in favor of Mike Pompeo, giving a little bit more information about his trip to North Korea, that it went well. All of that, of course, moves the needle on the Pompeo nomination. That's the hope of the White House. And here's the Prime Minister of Tokyo and his wife. Also, very interesting discussions today on trade and what Japan might be willing to do to narrow the trade gap that the president is obviously not happy with and that he would like to see narrow. One of the ways that might happen is the acquisition of weapons, defense, and machinery from the United States. Let's listen into the question here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. President, Mr. President, are you asserting South Korea on the table in your negotiations with Kim Jong-un? Thank you very much.
So the president talked out today. Apparently, sometimes he'll turn around and take a couple of questions in that kind of situation. But he has said quite a bit today during the press conference and also at the meeting earlier in the day. So they head in for dinner. We'll keep an eye on it. We'll let you know if there's any new information coming out of Mar-a-Lago tonight.
People are finally listening, and that's why I want to continue this fight and make sure that, change keeps happening and keeps going in the right direction and just keep the momentum going.
Olympic gymnast Jamie Dancher right here on the story back in January, and she is certainly working hard to keep that momentum going. Dancher is the first Olympic athlete to come forward against the abuse of Dr. Larry Nasser. She testified before Congress today, trying to get lawmakers now to crack down on the national governing bodies that were supposed to be overseeing these sports and upholding the rules as they apply to these young athletes. They say it is those figures at the top that are responsible for so much of this abuse. Dancher and the other athletes did not hold back. They slammed these adults who were supposed to protect them and made some shocking claims about their conduct.
My story is a case history of the power of abusers and organizations to silence powerless child victims of sexual abuse in the relentless pursuit of money and medals.
We couldn't smile or laugh during training. We were even afraid to eat too much in front of our coaches, who were pressured to keep us thin, even though we were doing extremely rigorous exercise for up to 35 hours a week.
Over my flip phone, I screamed to my mother, "I want to die." I was in pain.
Attorneys working for USA Gymnastics called former boyfriends and tried to dig up dirt on me, asking very personal and detailed questions about my sex life. They blamed my parents and generally attacked my character.
Unbelievable. We've been on this story since it broke, and we're following it through until all of the people who need to be held accountable are held accountable. With that, I'm joined by Olympic bronze medalist Jamie Dancher. Jamie, welcome back. Good to see you tonight.
Martha, thank you for having me.
Tell me, what was the response in there? Especially, you talk about the U.S. Gymnastics Association digging for dirt on you and trying to find out information that could make you appear to be promiscuous in some way in order to sort of pass over these allegations about this disgusting doctor?
Correct. I mean, that just tells you right there what kind of people we're dealing with here. And I'd first like to thank Senator Moran and Blumenthal for not only listening to us, but actually taking action to really make sure changes are made. Not only what could have prevented this, but what we can do in the future to continue the change. I'm very grateful for them. And like we've been talking about, the abusive culture is really how Larry Nassar was able to flourish in the situation for so many years. We talked about like physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, some even literally physically abused. And that's how he was able to get away with this. And without the culture of abuse, you know, he should have been stopped a long time ago.
There is an interview coming up with Michaela Maroney on NBC, who now has also come forward and said that she was a victim of this. She said from the very first time she ever met Larry Nassar, the first time that they, worked together, here's what she says.
He said that nobody would understand this and the sacrifice that it takes to get to the Olympics, so you can't tell people this. And he didn't say it in a way that was like mean or anything like that. I actually was like, that makes sense. I don't want to tell anybody about this. And I didn't believe that they would understand.
Jamie, does that sound familiar to you?
Absolutely, and it's absolutely heartbreaking. And at the same time, you know, I'm very proud of all my sister survivors for coming forward. And even hearing Craig today speak was very inspiring, and that's one of the reasons why I came forward. And I'm glad we're building. We have an army now, and we're not stopping until this fight is won.
I want to play. The Carollis are also interviewed in this piece that's going to air on Sunday, and this is not from that because that's not out yet. But this is Martha Carolli talking in a deposition in 2017. The coaches, watch this. It's a quote. Okay, I wanted them to be safe, but I had my duties. And my duties were very specifically about the training, and some other people were responsible for other parts. What do you think about that, Jamie?
Again, I'm not surprised. I actually got the chance to sit in some of the depositions of USAG officials, including former President Steve Penny, and that's what every single one of them did. When asking who was responsible for our safety or enforcing the policies that USAG supposedly had, they all pointed the finger, blamed each other, and lied.
So you believe, and I know that the board all resigned, and I remember saying to you, well, that's good news, right? They're going to get a new board, and you said, no, they'll just fill them with the same kind of people. Is that what's happening?
And that's exactly what's happening. They have gotten rid of some of the people have changed that are there, but a lot of the same people are just really their friends, like their right-hand man. They come in and it's the culture that hasn't changed, even though some of the people have changed. It's the culture it's been that way that, you know, we kind of attribute to the Carollis for starting this type of culture in the U.S., and that's what needs to change. And it's not going to change unless, in my opinion, they decertify USA Gymnastics and pretty much start all over.
Yeah. I know you say it's still going on, which is one of the most awful parts of this, and it has to stop. And I know you're not going to stop until you get some more answers. Jamie, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
I hope. You bet. Coming up next, one state is pushing legislation making sure that America doesn't become like Iceland, which is trying to eradicate all babies that would be born in that country who might have Down syndrome. But the Pennsylvania bill is sparking fierce debate.
If you have a child and you know that child has been pre-diagnosed with a condition such as Down syndrome, I don't think we as a body play a role in trying to tell somebody what they should do to make a decision.
Dr. Gina Loudon created a nonprofit that helps families adopt children like her son Samuel if someone doesn't want to keep their child with Down syndrome. Her take is next.
Thank you very much. It's been a great honor to have the Prime Minister of Japan and his extraordinary wife with us tonight at Mar-a-Lago. We call this the Southern White House. It was originally built, as you probably have heard, as the Southern White House, and it's turned out to be the Southern White House. So it's really an honor. We've had two very productive days on trade, on military, on North Korea, And we will continue, and we will also continue into the weeks ahead, and we're coming up with what will be a very fair trade deal for both countries. And we look forward to it. Plus, we have some very big meetings, as we all know, on North Korea. But, Mr. Prime Minister, I very much appreciate your being here, and we look forward to many, many years of great friendship. Thank you very much.
That was just moments ago at Mar-a-Lago.
We have basically eradicated almost Down syndrome from our society, that there is hardly ever a child born with Down syndrome in Iceland anymore.
So that report on the abortion of children with Down syndrome in Iceland ignited a firestorm. And now one state is taking steps against such practices here. The Pennsylvania State House overwhelmingly passed a bill that would ban abortion for babies who may have Down syndrome. Regardless, the bill faces a tough road ahead, as the state's Democratic governor is among the opponents. A spokesperson saying, quote, Pennsylvania Republicans are trying once again to criminalize a health care decision that Governor Wolf has made clear should be made by a woman and her doctor, not politicians in Harrisburg. Here now, Dr. Gina Loudon is a psychology expert and creator of, quote, They All Have Names, a nonprofit that helps families adopt children like her son Samuel, who has Down syndrome. Dr. Loudon, good to have you here tonight.
Always great to be with you.
We sort of follow this. There are several states that are taking measures along these lines, and they are looking for ways to ban these abortions that are based on early markers in testing that is done when someone's pregnant that say there's a possibility that there are some markers that could indicate Down syndrome. Sometimes those markers turn out to be false positives for Down syndrome.
True.
When you look at this and you see what's happening in these states, what goes through your mind?
Well, I'm glad that states like Pennsylvania are taking steps to recognize that as a culture, Martha, we talk a lot about tolerance and about civility and those sorts of things. And then at the same time, is there anything more heinous or more discriminating than killing someone based on a disability? I mean, we have to really ask ourselves that question as a culture. But like anything, you follow the money. There's a reason why that a legislature like the one in Pennsylvania can pass this by such a wide margin. I believe the numbers were like 139 to 56 or something.
Right.
But the governor opposes it, and he's a Democrat, and that's by design, Martha, because about $1.5 million of taxpayer money is spent every day on abortion, and most of that ends up in Democrat politicians' coffers. It's just the reality.
Yeah, I mean, you make such an interesting point in terms of tolerance. That is something that, you know, most people try to embrace about our society in general. But you heard the lawmaker who said that he believes that this is interfering with a decision that he believes should be made between a woman and her doctor.
Well, if this really isn't about money going into Democrat coffers, great. Then how about these same Democrat lawmakers propose bills that fund families when there are hundreds of them waiting, like my family adopting Samuel, hundreds of families waiting in the United States to adopt these babies? Why not fund those efforts? Adoption is an expensive process to begin with. It can cost between anywhere from like $10,000 to $50,000 to adopt a child with special needs. And at the same time, there are no monies available for that on the federal level. Instead, the money goes into killing the babies, which is, in my opinion, the worst form of discrimination against someone with a disability ever.
Well, as you point out, there is another choice, and They All Have Names helps to connect people who may not feel that they're equipped to carry out, to take care of this child, and they can find adoptive homes. And there's lists and lists of them waiting to be adopted. Thank you, or to adopt them, rather. Dr.
Thanks
Gina
for
Loudon,
covering
thank
this.
you. Good to see you. Good to see you tonight.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Martha. You too.
Quick break. We'll be right back with more story.